Yeah, so me and my partner Benji have been together for like 2.5 years, and his ultimate goal is like he wants a baby. We we basically are kind of now just to the point where we're having those initial conversations about,
Hmm.
you know, how to start the process,
All right.
what, how long is the process, all of that type of stuff. So I think I'm glad we're having this conversation today because then I can kind of get like the initial
Mm.
information about what is the whole process of it. Because I
Sure.
think it's daunting for, a gay couple who
Sure.
we have to think about five different levels of
Mm.
things. It's,
Hmm.
it's like, okay, I guess not even just where's the surrogate. The egg is different from the surrogates. Then it's like,
Right.
or, what is the process? So I kind of just wanted to get those kind of just like kind of go through that. So
Absolutely.
like if someone wants to have a baby through surrogacy, like what is the actual like first step?
Okay, so let's start off from the beginning. So, as part of any family building journey, for gay couples who need to use a donor egg or a gestational carrier, or even for same sex couples, heterosexual couples, or even single people by choice who want to start a family, I would say the first step is speaking to a physician at a center that specializes in, working with gestational carriers, surrogates. I use that term interchangeably, so
Yeah.
apologies if I do. It's the same phraseology. Speaking to a doctor or a nurse practitioner in the center and just sort of mapping out the process. And so that's kind of what we'll do today. Really, an initial consultation is the first step. And what's great about, let's say, our practice here in FE, New England Fertility, and a lot of other practices is that we try and make it a one-stop shopping sort of experience. We want to make it seamless. So most practices that work with gestational carriers and donor eggs and couples who want to utilize that service will have access to both the donor egg companies or agencies, the surrogacy agencies. So once again, very first thing, have a talk. Go over the process from start to finish. Now, as part of that consultation, let's say if you're consulting with me, I'll talk to you both about your medical history, anything unique about your history. I also love to hear about, the history of your relationship, what your goals are for family building, because everyone has different goals in terms of how many children they want to have. And for some couples, they'll do a consultation and then they'll decide, you know what? This process isn't for me. We are going to work on maybe adopting or fostering. So I think just the discussion is really helpful. Now, a lot of patients will have already sort of done their homework, and there are organizations. Men Having Babies is one of those organizations, and they have meetings throughout the country and throughout the world. So for a lot of couples, before they'll come in to see a doctor, first thing they'll do is maybe avail themselves to going to a conference and getting some information, either in person or online. So you come in, we have a consultation, we discuss medical history, any potential issues that could make the process a little more complicated. For instance, here at New England Fertility, we may have couples that one partner or both partners, let's say, has a history of HIV or a history of other syndromes or diseases that need to be dealt with. And it's still perfectly safe process to go through with both the egg donor, and a gestational carrier. But it's good to know this ahead of time so we can plan accordingly for a safe process. Once we've done that, then we work with you to find an egg donor. And our organization has egg donors that we work with. They're our egg donors. But also what's great is that there are also donor agencies. So what I always tell couples is we will refer you to our website for our egg donors with all their characteristics and we'll get to that in a minute. But if you don't find a donor you want to work with through New England Fertility, we work with other agencies that will help you find an egg donor that will then come to us for medical care. Now, that being said, what do couples want in an egg donor? Well, it's all very, it's It's as different as the couples themselves. I mean, each couple will have an egg donor that they, or what they want in a characteristic in an egg donor. If we have a biracial couple, they may want an egg donor who is either Caucasian or African American or Asian. So really, that's part of what, a couple is going to look for in an egg donor. And when you go to either our egg donor website or to one of the donor agencies, they'll work with you to figure out what characteristics you're looking for, and then they'll look at who they have for egg donors. So that's the whole process of picking out an egg donor. Now, once you've decided on an egg donor, that egg donor would then come to our practice and go through actually an IVF cycle, because the purpose is to get her eggs out, right? And that's just a regular IVF process where she takes medications and we extract her eggs. Now, for our gay couples, in most situations, half the eggs will be fertilized with one partner's sperm, the other half will be fertilized with the other partner's sperm, 50-50 split, so that embryos are created from both partners. That's just all part of the IVF process. And then those embryos, in typical fashion, are allowed to grow and progress, and then they are frozen. Now, we advocate doing chromosomal screening on those embryos, so you'll know that they are healthy embryos.
Yeah.
And for a lot of couples, we'll also be able to tell them the gender of the embryo. Is it a male embryo or a female embryo? So that's all part of the donor egg process. Now, clearly, before going ahead with that, there's some testing, let's say, that you and your partner may do, blood testing, semen analysis. That's all done before you even pick out a donor. And as part of the donor egg process, we have to send blood testing. We have to follow FDA regulations. So that's just all part of the process.
Right.
And for most clinics like ours, we make it a very seamless process. So, for example, if you have a couple who lives in Los Angeles but is coming to Connecticut, they literally only have to come to Connecticut once. They give their sperm specimen, we evaluate it, it gets frozen, and then we draw the blood we need to fulfill FDA requirements right then and there. So then, because a lot of couples are concerned, like, well, we live California, Texas, wherever, how many times are we going to need to come to Connecticut? Literally only once. The process of sperm freezing allows us to use that frozen sperm that's already been tested in the future to fertilize those donor eggs. But yeah, question.
Yeah. So love that that's the start. So basically, your all's clinic does where you're kind of the conduit of everything. So you're like hooking everybody up. So it's like, okay, the egg donor.
Yes.
So you guys are like the central of everything. So
Right.
we can kind of go through either your all's your all's egg donors or different agencies' egg donors, but then it all comes
Absolutely.
through you.
Correct.
And then so once, like, let's say once we've flipped through the pages, got our egg donor,
Right.
gone through like all that initial stuff, kind of what's the journey of the surrogacy? Because I'm assuming there's a lot of steps to not only have that or gestational carrier, if you will. I'm sure there's a bunch of steps there. And then also, do you all handle the care of the surrogate as well?
So first part, as we just discussed, getting a donor, getting eggs, fertilizing, creating embryos. Embryos are frozen. Second part is working with a surrogacy agency. So we don't provide our own surrogates. Most clinical practices don't, because it's a very complicated process. So there are agencies that specialize in gestational carriers or surrogates. So then once y'all have embryos in the freezer, then you'll either find an agency or we'll refer you to one that you'll talk to. And, in a lot of situations, we will give you a list of a couple of agencies, because like everything else in the world, you may find a surrogate you're looking for one agency, not another, or you may just organically jibe with one agency versus another. So once again, you would work with the agency and they would work with you to identify a carrier or a surrogate. Now, once you've identified that surrogate, we as the physicians will need to see that surrogate. So she will need to come to Connecticut, where we do medical screening on both she and her intimate partner, blood testing. She gets tested. because when all is said and done, we're fertility specialists, but we're also gynecologists. So we have to make sure that A, we look through her chart to make sure we agree that it's safe for her to be a surrogate, because remember, it's her health, but also the health of your baby that she's carrying. Once she's been approved by us, it's like, all right, come on to our office. We schedule, we call it a medical screening day. She will come in person. She will go through testing. And then at the end of that screening day, we'll actually have a consult. We'll actually have a meeting with the gestational carrier, the surrogate. And then let's say you and your partner will be zoomed in. We'll go over the process for the gestational carrier or surrogate moving forward. We manage the medical part once again. The agency will manage the legal part, the contractual part. And what's great about these agencies is they're very adept at finding you carriers and working with them in terms of the legal process and the screening process in terms of, states have different laws about when somebody delivers, who the parents are on the birth certificate, and the agency takes care of all that so that when your baby is born, depending on the state, it'll either be both your and your partner's name goes on the birth certificate, or they have legal processes where that will be done after the baby is born. Once the carrier has been approved and gone through the medical screening, we then take over in terms of the medical care where, in a nutshell, it's a process where we prepare her uterus with estrogen and hormones to receive one of your embryos. And then once the uterus is ready to have that embryo put in, she'll come back to Connecticut. A lot of the monitoring is done wherever she lives. Once again, she only has
Yeah,
to be
because it really doesn't matter. It's just like
exactly. And the
the
medical
few
monitoring,
times.
the medical screening's done here, then she goes home. The monitoring to make sure her uterus is being properly prepared is done wherever she lives. Both we and the agency will arrange for her to have a place to go for ultrasounds. Once she's ready to come back, because it's time to thaw an embryo and put it back in, she comes to Connecticut. She has an embryo transfer, which is a very quick process. One of your embryos has been thawed, gets transferred into her, and then she heads home the next day. It's very simple, no sedation, it's not really a surgery, it's not really a procedure. And then once she gets back home, monitoring is done once again. If she's pregnant, we follow her for up to 8 to 9 weeks of pregnancy, and then we'll send her off to her obstetrician for delivery with her regular private general obstetrician. So obviously there are a lot more pieces down in the weeds, but that's kind of the overarching 30,000-foot view of that as well. So, yes, please.
Well, I was going to say, yeah. So from the time that, like, let's say we were ready tomorrow to
Sure.
fly to Connecticut, you know, just in this fantasy world right now.
Sure, sure,
But
sure.
let's say we were ready to start tomorrow. Kind of what is the normalized or standard deviation? What's the standard time that
Of
the
course.
entire process takes?
So the standard time, the egg donor, having you guys go through your testing is very quick. We're ready to do it. We make arrangements for you to come here. You get that done. We get the medical testing results back in 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. You then choose a donor, which I think that can be very variable. But if you find a donor pretty quickly, you could literally find a donor in a couple of weeks to a month. Once you've arranged with that donor that she will be your donor, we make arrangements for her to come here and go through an IVF cycle, which can be done pretty quickly as well. Usually the standard IVF cycle is about the donor is on fertility meds for about 10 to 12 days. Then she gets her eggs extracted, and then she's done. She goes, and then everything else happens in the embryology lab. That's another 7 days. Then the embryos are created. If you're going to test the embryos, the embryo testing takes about another 2 weeks. So I always tell people that once you start and identify a donor, we'll have embryos in the freezer, and you'll know whether they're normal or abnormal within 6 weeks, give or take. Now, the gestational carrier process or the surrogacy process, and those embryos are frozen. So the
They're
timeline to
good to
choose a
go for a
surrogate,
while.
yeah, the timeline to
Yeah.
choose a surrogate is up to you. But once you've chosen a surrogate and she's gone through medical screening, which once again takes about 2 weeks, we can get her started with a cycle pretty quickly. And she's on the estrogen tablets for about, I always tell couples that when your carrier starts her estrogen tablets to prepare her uterus, plan that those embryos are going to go back in within 26 to 28 days. So in a month, sort of a month to make the eggs, right, with the donor, 2 weeks to test them, so that's about 6 weeks. And then once you're ready to transfer embryos in, plan on a month. And then within 2 weeks after the embryos are put in, you'll know whether or not your carrier is pregnant.
And so basically it's like if even if you wanted to start the process and do kind of like the first part where you create the embryo, do
Yeah,
all that, and then wait, you could like sit on that and wait for as long as you needed to find, or like if you just weren't ready yet,
yeah,
you could
exactly.
do part of it and then,
Right. Exactly. Those embryos can stay frozen for years. And what we also have a lot of couples will do is, we're fortunate here at New England Fertility. We have a lot of couples who fortunately get pregnant, have success, have a child, and then call us a year later and say, okay, now I'm ready to have another child. Now we're going to use my partner's embryo. We've already reached out to the gestational, the surrogate. She wants to work with us again. We call that a sibling journey. So those embryos can stay
yeah.
frozen for years and years and years. And that allows you the timeline to sort of set the pace.
I feel like we're one and done, but or at least that's what I've said. I don't know
Okay.
about his side
Right.
yet, but
I mean, the
but
great thing
I like
about,
to know that that's an
right.
option.
And also the great thing about, the biology of men is that the sperm does not age the same way if you have a woman who's working with her own eggs. So, for a lot of our gay male couples, I would say the average age is sort of in, 30s or above and really, can go all the way up. We don't really have restrictions in terms of age. So I think for a lot of patients in their family building journey, you can personalize it. Sort of what is our journey?